I love the psoas muscle. I actually think it's the soul of the body, as one writer wrote. But why I really love it is that in my clinic, manual therapy on the psoas and around the tissue and fascia of the psoas tends to yield really, really, really good results. So it's a magic worker for us manually with our hands as therapists. That being said, you still at home can do a lot to address the psoas. So I would like for you to have already seen the video that shows you the anatomical connections of psoas because it is such a big player. But I'm going to review them right now. The psoas attaches deep in the hip joint at a little nub on the inner back side of the top of the hip called the lesser trochanter. And then that tendon takes a diagonal turn up towards the back of the spine. Well, it attaches to the spine. It attaches to L5, L4, L3, L2, L1, even T12. It attaches to the side of the vertebral body in the transverse processes of the vertebral bodies. So basically, this big muscle has slips into the bones of your low back. And this is why it is both a low back stabilizer and it can also help flex. And even in some positions, studies show extend the spine, but primarily more flex. But its bigger role is in keeping those vertebrae stable. And also its primary role is as a hip flexor, so it bends the hip. What's interesting about this muscle and why I tend to get some results that others may not is giving this muscle attention. There's a right psoas and a left psoas. And just like the back hip, very commonly people tend to have a tighter right psoas or left psoas. Now imagine there's a spine between my hands and here's the psoas. If the right side's tighter and it attaches to all 5 lumbar vertebrae, you could see how it would side bend and rotate the lumbar spine. So when you have a right-left disparity, a right-left difference, it can cause strain and further disc protrusions. So we're very careful on testing psoas length and strength, and we really want the right and left psoas to be as symmetrically flexible and as evenly strong as possible so that those vertebrae can also be best aligned and that we're not adding increased strain or sprain to our low back. So we're going to learn a psoas stretch now, and we'll do actually a couple different ones in a moment, but I just wanted to give you why the psoas is so important and why it should be a part of your program. And why you should do your exercises, because you can really change the forces, the strain on your low back by addressing this muscle. One more consideration for you is that the psoas runs through the intestines. It runs through the colon, and very commonly issues with the colon affect the psoas, and issues with the psoas affect the colon. The fascia of the psoas connects all the way to the kidneys. It's part of the posterior abdominal wall. It connects fascially to the ascending and descending colon. So psoas, iliopsoas, is a big player with the organs and vice versa. So when you are doing your psoas exercises, could you improve your organ health? Could you improve your intestinal function? Absolutely. So people with constipation, let's address the psoas. And people who have chronic back pain notice, perhaps, that when they're in a flare-up, they tend to be more constipated. And that's because the muscle spasms associated with psoas can compress upon the intestines, both the small intestine and the colon. So it can create some of the constipation issues. So psoas affects everything. Now, as I said, we have a right and a left psoas, and it attaches to 5, sometimes 6, even up to T12, and there's been anatomical dissections that show it is also attached all the way up to T11 on some people. It has interdigitations and fascial connections to the diaphragm, so that's our primary respiratory muscle. But the reason why I'm bringing you back to it is because if it side bends or rotates, if it affects the alignment of the low back, is that going to affect the neck? Absolutely. There's not a neck patient that's not getting psoas exercises in my clinic or if you're utilizing my programs. And the reason for that, again, is the rotations that happen in the low back continue up the chain. And here's why. The eyes run the system. So my brain makes my eyes stay relatively level. If I was rotated at my low back and it was, let's exaggerate for you to see, like a side bend and rotation like that, it would follow all the way up. I would be looking at you like this. But the brain's not going to allow that to happen. So then there's a counter rotation in the thoracic spine and another counter rotation, and then counter rotations in the neck, all because the brain says, I don't care, the eyes have to be level. So that's why you don't just get one out of alignment vertebrae. It becomes a little dance all the way up and all the way down the chain because the brain is trying to keep its communication level through the eyes. So psoas is a player in the neck, in the thoracic spine, in the lumbar spine, in intestinal well-being, digestion, organ health. And one last thing about the neck specifically is, again, psoas also is known to perhaps increase or decrease the curvature of the low back. Some studies say when it's shortened and tight symmetrically bilaterally, it increases the lordosis, but there's just as many anatomical dissections and studies that show it does the opposite, and we won't get into that. What I do want you to know is that the psoas has a role on the position of the low back. The lumbar spine, the low back, is supposed to be a lordosis, an inward curve that matches the neck. The cervical spine also is a lordosis. And when the lumbar spine has a change in that curve, the same change happens to the neck. It's one spinal S unit and they affect each other. So again, one of the magic ways in helping the neck is by addressing the psoas. One, because when you're in a lot of neck pain, it's hard to move the neck, but you can manage a hip flexor stretch. It doesn't seem to bother your neck. So I can treat your neck by addressing the psoas. So that's for the neck people who are learning about why am I doing this hip flexor stretch. And I think that's it for now, but you can see it's a really, really big player in my all-time favorite muscle.